Welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm Peter Schneider. This is Ben Escobedo. We are here to talk about wireless audio for production sound, and specifically the future of spectrum for production sound. There's been a couple of developments that are important to share with everybody in the group of production sound mixers. A lot of this has come from our participation in WMSA, the Wireless Microphone Spectrum Alliance, which you will hear us, or at least me, continuously pitch your participation in. Membership is free, and they really are advocates. I feel like in this presentation, in this duo, I feel like the eye candy, which I'm sorry for everybody, because you've really done a lot of work, and this is your expertise. So without further ado, Ben, take it away.
Well, thanks so much. I'm proud to be here on behalf of WMSA. I do work for Shure, but this is not like a sales pitch. This is more of a protection of the spectrum kind of pitch and how you can be involved. If you're not familiar with WMSA, we encourage you to check out our website and sign up. WMSA is dedicated to protecting the RF spectrum and providing education and advocacy from all the policymakers and stakeholders like yourselves that depend on wireless for their livelihood. So in this presentation today, we're going to cover a few things, including the spectrum auction history. We'll talk a little bit about what happened back then and what maybe on the docket for tomorrow. The current landscape for spectrum for wireless microphones. What are the common places that wireless microphones operate in the spectrum? As far as increasing channel count and reliability and scalability, we'll talk about the newest type of construct called WMAS or WMAS, some of the pros and cons and how that can help you in your workflow. And then we'll touch base on the Spectrum Alliance in general, again, how you can be involved for zero cost and what we are doing to advocate for spectrum in DC and everywhere in the United States on behalf of all wireless microphone users.
I'll talk a little bit about the auction. In next month, I'm scheduled. Ben, are you going to DC?
Not this trip.
All right.
I have been.
To advocate for spectrum, the last time I went, about 5 or 6 years ago, it was Howard Kaufman from Electro and I and a bunch of other people. And I'm surprised they let me back in because I remember specifically pointing out to the FCC that their wireless microphones on their dais was illegal by their own standards. And so that's sort of like, when these laws come into being, when we are told we can no longer use spectrum, there's hundreds of thousands of users that are affected. I mean, if our own government can't keep up with them, how challenging is it for us? So
it's a funny thing. It's one of those things people are like, oh, it's a wireless mic, it just works, and they take it for granted. And the truth is there's a lot of other companies and corporations that are vying for the spectrum. And you might have heard it before, but the UHF is pretty much like your Park Place and Boardwalk. It's a beachfront property. And the reason being is it's the sweet spot where you can get a lot of wave penetration with a minimal amount of output power, meaning your battery works well, and the antenna doesn't have to be ridiculously long. So as you go lower in frequency, the antennas become longer, and that's unwieldy on camera, obviously. And they're like, well, why don't you just use 5 gig or 10 gig? And like, well, we could, but you need a lot more output power to get the same distance because the penetration and the wavelengths are shorter. Just like your Bluetooth doesn't work very far, or your Wi-Fi doesn't go through walls that well, that type of stuff. So this is really the sweet spot, and we've been enjoying the spectrum since the beginning of wireless microphones, and TV stations have enjoyed it because of its wave penetration properties. And now with things moving and going to streaming and going direct and catching all your stuff via the internet rather than over the air, this has been looked at heavily for the next generation of whatever wireless technology for cell phones and iPhones and Starlink or whatever else. So with that being said, we were coming off in 2016, 2017 is this last auction, and we lost again. We lost to 700 megahertz, so we're up to about 698 or so, and then we lost now contiguous. Most UHF wireless goes 470 to 608, and then there's some gaps which we'll explore and talk about that. And then we're pretty much at our max now. Across the industry, manufacturers have done the best we can based on physics without putting a lot of channels in a small space and compromises and still maintaining low latency and all those requirements. It's forced us to kind of push the limits of what technology is available to make this all work. unlike, just a regular internet web browser, I can't just hit F5 and refresh it and get the data again. Like, it's got to be great sounding audio, long battery life, with low latency and super reliable, and check all those boxes. And that's a very unique set of challenges for any manufacturer to do. Digital wireless is hard. It's not something that you can just, roll that's totally easy. Everything is a bespoke solution and designed for these markets that we operate in. So here we are today. 470 to 608 is about the lion's share of what's left. And people ask all the time, they're like, "Hey Ben, when's the next auction going to be?" Or what? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, we're kind of pushing to not have one. And what would we do with the rest of the TV stations that are already occupying this space? It's like we have to put them somewhere and so forth. So recently, right after NAB, actually 3 days before the NAB show, this threat come in. I don't want to say the sky is falling here, but I want you to be aware that this is happening right now. There's a petition from Landover Saturn V LLC, who is targeting channels 28 through 36 for other uses, including satellite and next generation cell phones and things like that. And I don't want to say this is happening, but it's not a rulemaking yet, so don't think I'm kind of crying wolf here. But people are coming after this spectrum even right now to try to petition the FCC to say, hey, this is going to be really good for everyone. We can raise $15 billion and all this kind of stuff. This is being talked about, and this is the other side of the coin that's trying to take away our spectrum and make it even harder for wireless microphones to be used. Like Peter was saying, with WMSA, a lot of things, we not only talk to the FCC, but we talk to all the other agencies too, like NSF and NTIA, OET. There's a lot down there that are all honestly been very open recently. And we'll touch base on this in a little bit, but I think a lot of it comes down to with all the upcoming events. What events am I talking about? Any idea? World Cup.
World Cup.
There you go.
Yeah.
There's one. How about another one? Maybe on the West Coast. Olympics.
Yeah.
And maybe one in Washington, D.C.? Close. The 250 celebration, right? Big deal. Happy birthday to America and all that stuff. So we've been getting a lot of oh yeah, we want these events to go well from the government and such, and they've been really cool about it. And in my experience, a lot of the conversations we've had with FCC and all these other fancy three-legged organizations are it's when you're a kid, you're well, we don't really care. Go ask your dad, that kind of thing. They're we're fine with it, but as long as the other entities are cool with it too, then we're cool with it as well. And we've also not only been talking to the organizations, but also the White House task force for these things, because of course they don't want to invite the world over and have a really poor experience. And from the manufacturer's perspective and WMSA perspective, we've been trying to support these things to make sure they go as well, and at the same time provide awareness of what's going on with wireless.
I'm going to say one scary thing about the Saturn V thing, and then a piece of good news, which is one thing I saw in their proposal was how well funded they are, which I thought was kind of ominous. The good news is, thanks in large part to the lobbying that WMSA is doing, I finally feel like we're getting traction into government entities understanding what we need and what our needs are, and the importance of balancing commercial interests with the content creation interest. In other words, the forces that we are that create the content are diametrically opposed to the forces that distribute the content. And I think that the rule makers are understanding our needs more and more. So that's the good news.
There is some good news there. Yeah, everybody wants it to go well, and they're listening to us. They're finally realized that we exist. However, I think there have been. So we talked about, I think, on the WMSA call about the wireless microphones may have not even been mentioned in this type of proposal.
Right.
They're worried about talking about other TV stations being moved, but wireless microphones weren't even in the conversation. Again, people just take it for granted. I turn it on, it works, and it's legal, all of that, and that's not exactly the case. WMSA, joining WMSA, and we'll talk more about Part 74 licensing, those type of things from your perspective are low or zero cost and can kind of provide awareness that people are actually using wireless microphones and we care about it. It's important to our livelihoods. So again, we encourage you to check that out at wmsa.org. With this, let's take a quick look at where we're at today. And this is kind of a brief overview of all the operating bands in the United States. Granted, this will be different in other countries around the world. Everybody has their own different rules and such, but largely North America is operating in something like this. From the legend here, we see VHF, UHF, ISM, DECT, Wi-Fi, DFS. As we go lower to the left, those are the VHF frequencies. They're longer wavelength. They have great penetration. But as mentioned, they also have longer antennas to match. So that's why you see like a VHF boat antenna is like, very long, 10 feet or so to match that wavelength. And while there are wireless microphones that operate in there, and maybe your ComTech or other things as well, which have those long antennas, there is a use and a place for that, but it's not really the ideal kind of connects all the dots. It does some of them, the long range and penetration, but the long antenna is kind of a bummer, especially when you're trying to shoot video with it. Then we move to the lion's share of where we're at today in the UHF. Most professional wireless microphones are UHF. These are your low latency, what we use out in the field, what we use on stage. Like almost every professional, high fidelity, low latency wireless microphone is operating in the UHF band. We share this with television stations where they're not operating, we operate. And this is 470 to 608 contiguous. Then that little red stripe there is the radio astronomy band. This is TV 37, and it's basically these sites across the U.S. which are static that are listening to extraterrestrial events out in space, right? And these are super, super sensitive receivers that can listen below the noise floor. There's also some medical telemetry in hospitals and things that are in this band, and for those reasons, it's traditionally been off limits. But WMSA is working with the FCC and others to see if we can use these bands where it is appropriate. What if we're not by a hospital? What if we're not by one of these listening sites and it's not going to affect what's going on there? May we have access to it? And the conversation has been started. I'm not saying that tomorrow it's going to happen, but it could. We could be finding ourselves operating there, maybe based on geolocation or where you're at. If you're not near one of these other incumbent users, you can do that. And that's exciting because this has been verboten since the beginning of TV 37, where you can't operate on it, and now their conversation is shifting a little bit.
There's two things I think I want to amplify. One, I look around the room, like how many people are old enough to remember putting VHF antennas on actors with safety pins and rubber bands? Yeah, okay, thank you. And then there's also newer faces, and so I want to just to bring us all together. Spectrum is a shared resource. So when Ben talks about incumbent users, like radio astronomy, and then you can imagine some hospital telemetry, meaning like heartbeat and stuff like that. Manufacturers said, well, wait, if we're inside a hospital, can't we use that spectrum because we're all inside? It's been a fight. I think one thing that spectrum, people that are primary users of spectrums are worried about is that we are a bunch of we're the Wild West. We'll fire up anywhere, we don't care. And I think part of gaining access, for example, to TV 37 has been a very, very slow, careful, coordinated successful attempt to show that we are not the Wild West. We are professionals. So yeah, those are the two.
That's great points. Yeah, those sites are so sensitive. They can listen to things that we can't even see on a normal spectrum analyzer, $1 million equipment type of deal. After the radio astronomy band, there's a slight little gap, and then there's this gap between 614 and 617. Most manufacturers use 614 to 616. This is called the guard band. And when the last repack was designed, they put this little sliver in there to make sure that things weren't right next to each other, to give a little breathing room, if you will. And some microphones can operate in that range with some restrictions, like notably output power. And some other, small restrictions. But that's a little sliver that you can use, and if we're talking about Shure stuff, that would be the plus of the G57 plus range of that little tiny sliver. It's not much, like 2 megahertz, but with digital wireless microphones, so you can fit a handful of mics in there pretty easily. And then we skip all over this, up into up to 900. We'll come back and talk more about what's going on in the duplex gap in the 600. But the yellow band there in ISM is your industrial, scientific, medical, and this is 902 to 928. This is very similar to a band that's like 2.4, if you will. So it's a kind of an open band that a lot of manufacturers can use, and you'll find everything in there from remote controlled cars to garage door openers to children's toys, and you name it. Everything can be operated in there. So a lot of wireless microphones do not use that band just because it is so polluted. That is the ISM band 902 to 928. Then we go up into the STL band, that little blue sliver in 900 megahertz. And STL stands for Studio Telemetry Link. And basically, this is kind of much more used back in the older days when studios had to broadcast content from one location to another. They still do that somewhat, but a lot of it's now done over the internet because internet's so great. But with the appropriate licensing, wireless microphone users, can use this 941 through 960 band. And this is called the STL band. It's kind of a nice place to be because you can't just go down to your local electronics retailer and usually buy this without the appropriate credentials. You're not going to find it at Guitar Center and such. So it's kind of exclusive. Now we're talking, about 20 megahertz, 19 megahertz or so. It doesn't sound like a lot, but a lot of modern wireless systems can get 17 or even 47 channels in 6 megs. So we can use it. We do use it. And it's one of those things, we'll talk more, but like if you get a Part 74 license, you'll have access to that band and you can use gear in there. I wouldn't be my first go-to, of course, if I was buying a new wireless system, but based on where I was using it, I might absolutely consider using that STL band. And we'll talk more about crazy cities like Phoenix and others where that is pretty much the only game in town. Right? And then we move up, we have DECT, DECT. This is from the old cordless telephones, not wireless, but like the ones you used to have in your kitchen, the Unidens, the Panasonics, all those, if you remember those back in the 90s. And everybody had those and they were awesome until everybody had a cell phone in their pocket, and then we kind of forgot about it. But the band has still existed, and the chipsets that are being used still exist. And manufacturers across the industry are taking those chipsets and using them in new and exciting ways. There are still parameters they have to follow in TDMA and how the whole thing operates, but they're using them for a lot of places where wireless latency is not important. So like conferencing or video even, some examples like the Sennheiser AVX system is DECT. And there's some Shure stuff like the Microflex wireless things that are in the DECT frequency, and latency isn't great. It's like maybe 14 to 20 milliseconds in that neighborhood, so it's not great for live performance, but on a video, it's a frame or two. It's not a big deal.
Right. Your Riedels and your Clearcoms are there, and Hollylands are there as well.
Absolutely. The lion's share of professional productions in DECT, as you probably know, is like the Riedels and all that, the 1.9. At any major event or live event, like that's where the comms live. Is they take up the whole thing, and it's pretty much reserved just for that system, which is fine. It works great. We don't really care about low latency for intercom systems, right? And it's a great place to put that stuff. And then we move up into the 2.4 and the 5 gig, which you all know and love and have in your pocket and all that. And it's like your basic Wi-Fi. And there are wireless systems that work in Wi-Fi, but it's the same kind of challenge that we have with the ISM band, where it's open, so everybody can use it. And one day you can get 8 or 14 wireless mics in there, and the next day you get 0. Or somebody walks in and puts a Nest thermostat over there in the corner, and I have problems all of a sudden. It's very unpredictable. I'm not saying that there can't be great sound quality and good performance. They can, but there's no coordination. It's one of those devices, you turn it on, it does its thing, and it either works or it doesn't. So obviously in what you all do and live performance stuff, that is a no-go. So I'm thinking like, bar band type of deals, or 1 or 2 channels of wireless, or even the labs like the Hollyland or the DJI, which are great products, by the way, and it's perfect for that application. But on a live film shoot or a rock show or a broadcaster down in Midtown, probably not the best option to choose. And this is kind of where we're at today. And we can see, what we're talking about in the previous slide, this is what is under fire. This is really where they're trying to whittle down even more and looking to steal or repurpose that spectrum for other uses.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning it, like Ben said, it is that beachfront property because of the physics, the properties of the wavelength, penetrates the farthest with the least amount of RF power, which is why UHF is so desired by forces that have a lot more money than us. The other thing I would say, I would encourage people as they look at this, is these are bands, and you can start to plan your use of that band. That term from frequency coordination is literally band planning. So, some bands are better than others based on how crowded they are, how publicly accessible they are. So I think, I remember at NEB, the trade show recently, 400 access points you'd go through. I mean, it was just ridiculous for Wi-Fi. Yeah, and you were close.
I was right there, and I'm looking through the list. I'm like, "Where's my access point?" It wasn't even there. Crazy.
And I think that's why manufacturers in our world tend to use those bands for sort of low bandwidth applications, right? Like the control channel for a wireless mic,
yep.
Is a good use of that. And same for the lighting and the camera friends, right? The wireless follow focus, lighting control, they all tend to gravitate to the 900 ISM band or the 2.4 ISM band. One of the things, and I think we'll get into this a little later, is those bands, just because those truly are the Wild West, can still have coordination, mindfulness brought to it, and we'll touch on that.
Absolutely.
Later.
So we've taken a look at the kind of the big picture of what's happening, and this is just more of a kind of granular detail of what's happening here. We talk a lot about white spaces, and this is a term for the spaces that are unused in the TV spectrum, where the TV channels here, and there's nothing here. That's where you want to operate your wireless microphones. It's common sense. But another thing that this slide kind of shows is that there are advantages to getting your Part 74 license, including access to more ranges, as well as access to higher power, meaning more transmit distance. So, for example, if we look at the lower part of the spectrum here, licensed wireless microphones can use a 1/4 watt or 250 milliwatt, where most unlicensed users, which, face it, are the majority of them, are legally can operate up to 50 milliwatt. And then we get up into the radio astronomy band, which we talked about, and that little 2 megahertz guard band. And that does have some output power restrictions, 20 milliwatt instead of the normal 50 here. And then these big black boxes are what the auction, the people that won the auction are operating in. That's your 5G and your all kinds of telecommunications stuff in there. And of course, we can't operate on that. It's not allowed. Most devices are locked out, so you can't. But there is a little bit of a kind of what we call the duplex gap. And this is, again, for the same type of technical reasons, where I just don't want to put my uplink and my downlink of those black boxes next to each other. When they designed this, they were like, well, we're going to put a little gap in between just to kind of give it some breathing room. And in that gap, we can operate wireless microphones. Unlicensed users can use some of the spectrum at certain powers, and licensed users can use the majority of the spectrum. This is about 653 to 663. Again, 10 megahertz doesn't sound like a lot, but I mean, easily over 20 channels and many more if you're using different modulation schemes and such in that band. So that's something to think about. And then, of course, 698 all the way up to basically the ISM and the STL band up in 941 through 960 is unusable, but that's where that little STL band gap lives, and that is where those microphones can operate. And again, with a Part 74, you can use those microphones as needed.
One thing I was going to point out, 470 to 512 in different cities is public safety.
Yes.
And so in New York, it's 470 to 488. Here's what is really tricky about that. Most of our stuff can go into that between 470 and 512. When you start a scan, that scan might be clean. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to an installation and they're complaining about interference issues, and the thing is set to 470.0 because they obviously just turned it on and the first frequency was clear. What happens with public safety, it's just a fancy way of saying two-way radios for law enforcement, right? So if it scans and they're not keyed, it thinks it's clean. You set your equipment there, and then they key up. So they are the primary user of that, meaning that it is illegal for us to use that spectrum in those cities. And if you happen by accident to be using that, it is very likely that you'll experience interference at some point on that. So there's a list, and I know it's available. I've seen it on Shure's website. And by the way, people can get this presentation if they...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll give this
not a
presentation.
problem. Yeah, we have it on our frequency finder on the website. We also have it, if you're using Wireless Workbench, you can put in your zip code. It'll tell you what the public safety is there. And additionally, if you're using the Wireless Workbench mobile app, which has been recently updated, that alone will know where you're at and make sure that you're not on those frequencies. It's real, folks. I got a message last week from FDNY complaining about a church in New York that was operating on their frequencies, and they were upset about it. And I'm not sure. They contacted us and they were like, "Hey, this is happening." I'm like, well, "Okay, I'm sorry, but what do you want us to do about it? We're not enforcement. I'm not going to knock on their door." And I'm like, I encourage you to have a conversation with them and work it out. And they probably were just unaware of that's happening, but they were visibly upset, and they were able to identify where it was coming from. And as the user, it was affecting their fire operations and emergency operations, and they had every right to be upset about that. So you don't want to find yourself in that position. And as Peter was saying, which is golden, unlike TV stations, these are either not on all the time. Everything's good. You set your show up, you're having a nice shoot, and all of a sudden, boop, somebody keys on their walkie and ruins your whole set, your whole take. So be aware of that and use the tools that are available to make sure that you're not on public safety in major cities. White spaces, we talked about this already. Essentially, where TV stations aren't being broadcasted at that location is where we put our wireless microphones. Certain cities are better than others. Let's take a look at, again, 470 to 608, the majority of UHF, and just kind of a snapshot here across major cities in the US. It's pretty bad in a lot of places, including New York, but also DC. We pick on Phoenix quite a bit because in this band at Phoenix, you can see that there are only two frequencies or two open TV channels, I should say, available here and here, right? And then Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Chicago, DC, Atlanta, even New York here, we've got a handful open, but again, other people might already be using microphones and other devices in that area. It's not guaranteed that those are completely clean, but there are a lot of TV stations because of after the repack, they pushed everything down and they have to go somewhere. So this is what we're looking at. And when you're faced with this, I have a lot of users that do shoots maybe in Phoenix or tours or rock and roll and that kind of thing. And like Peter was saying about band planning is kind of like where you're going to be doing your job and trying to figure out if the gear that you have is going to work in that environment. A lot of bands and things go, start a tour and they get to Phoenix and they find out half their stuff's unusable because they have a fraction of the spectrum they thought they would have available. Being able to use duplex gap devices and STL band gives you an advantage because you're not have to worry about any of this. You're going to be kind of on your own island, basically, somewhere else. So something to think about. It's getting real, and it's about to get even realer with this, this latest petition, right?
I'm just curious, at show of hands, how many people have wideband wireless mics that can go across the entire UHF spectrum?
That's good.
That's good. I mean, I think that's, when we talk about like what are some of the strategies to use, I think, look, this is obviously self-serving for both of us to say this, but upgrading to wideband wireless mics is really like a very, very important strategy. And the other thing that I would say, just in terms of strategies, is as you look and you see, the way that the empty TV channels tend to sort of fall on the spectrum, think about your talent wireless, the stuff you're getting from the set to your cart, and separating that out from the stuff you're sending from your cart to the set, and separating that out. And sometimes there's a whole chunk of TV stations that make that an obvious decision, and sometimes you get scans, like I've seen New York scans worse than Phoenix scans,
sure,
as everybody in this room has. That's where having access to those other bands and being licensed is really critical. So.
Absolutely. Trying to separate your transmit, your IFBs or IEMs away from your mics is pretty much 101 as far as coordination. I would always do that in every case. And then if you have a choice, like we're looking at maybe 5 open TV stations or usable in Phoenix here, they're in various levels of noise floor, right? So I might want to put my most important money channel or my talent on the lowest amount of noise floor, just to ensure that that one is going to be the most reliable, like here versus say here. Not saying this wouldn't work, but this one would definitely get you more range and more reliability because of the lower noise floor that's present. So I'm not going to beat on this too much, but like on the radio spectrum, a lot of people ask, well, why don't you just use another frequency range? We touched base on that earlier, right? Like, well, 5 gig, 10 gig, 6 gig, whatever it is. And like, well, that's the problem is as we go higher in frequency, the penetration is less and you need more power to get the same distance. So those are not ideal things for any portable battery operated device, of course. If plugged in the wall, maybe a little different. And as we go lower, we get great penetration, but the antennas are ridiculous. So that's kind of the sweet spot of, again, why we're in this beachfront Park Place Boardwalk type of situation here in the USA in this band. One recent development that, people are always looking for new and exciting ways to do spectrum. And Clearcom announced this free speak cell on the intercom, basically using 5G or LTE or CBRS networks that you would normally use for internet on your cell phone to do comms, which is pretty interesting idea. I will say this has been kind of researched quite a bit, but this Clearcom product does seem exciting because it's like built in. You can like put the SIM card right in the device and it will connect not to just your regular AT&T or Verizon network, but your own private, like you call up Verizon or AT&T and have them deploy a bunch of cell sites around your area, and now all of a sudden you have your own private network, and whatever you want to do on that network, including send audio, can be done, and it makes it quite easy. We've seen other companies kind of approach this as well. Like there's a company called Green Go that has been used at the Super Bowl like 3 or 4 years ago, and since then, just because everybody needs more comms, everybody needs more space, and as we talked, if there's like a Riedel system there or a Clearcom system taking up the whole 1.9, that's it. Like this is the maximum amount of packs and transmits and receives that you can have. So this is an exciting way of thinking about it, but I will preface this as like as far as intercoms, this is very, very cool and it works well. At this time, the technology is not quick enough to do low latency wireless microphones that people need for film shoots or singing the national anthem or something like that. The latency is just too much. But who knows? Maybe in my lifetime it will be low enough where all wireless microphones are whatever 12G or whatever it is then to make that work. But it's a cool concept.
Yeah, this is literally brand new. And if you want to experience it, you can go to the Clearcom table and check it out. Yeah. So
makes it really easy to deploy without having to run a bunch of fiber or a bunch of cables around your venue. You just have Verizon put up a bunch of towers and you have your own network for that event. And a Super Bowl or World Cup or something like that, it makes a lot of sense. Delving into other ways we can kind of make the spectrum more efficient to be used is this concept of WMAS. And this is, in the last year or two, it's been a new thing that hit the market. And it's not really a new technology, but it's really a regulatory construct allowing microphone manufacturers and users to put more channels in a wider block than we were allowed before. So right now, all wireless microphones are typically regulated at 200 kilohertz or 0.2 megahertz of bandwidth, and that's the allotted amount that they can do. And whatever you want to do in there, fine, analog, digital, whatever, that's fine. But for the first time ever, the regulatory bodies have opened that up and saying you can use larger than 200 kilohertz as long as you're efficient with it. And companies like Sennheiser and Shure have launched these WMAS products that do various things and new and exciting things. There will be much more to come from, I think, everybody in the industry to take advantage of this. But essentially, we are taking, instead of a lot of little 200 kilohertz frequencies, we're going to put them in a big block somewhere in the spectrum and then operate multiple microphones on top of it.
And I think it's important, for our market to remember that WMAS isn't just one product. When we talked about DECT earlier, we were really talking about a protocol for communication, but WMAS is really just what Ben said. We can occupy more than 200 kilohertz of spectrum.
Yeah.
And it's typically anywhere from 2 megahertz, I've seen 2 megahertz in Shure's deployment, up to 8 if you use Sennheiser's overseas. But within that, it could be anything you want. Like Sennheiser's implementation is kind of interesting because it's like a kind of network where each device can send and receive at the same time within a full TV channel. And Shure has a different implementation where it's unidirectional in terms of the audio path. The control is a different band. But there's different horses for different courses. Is that the expression?
I agree. Yeah, it's like the block is whatever, and whatever 11 herbs and spices you want to put in that block is up to you. You know, it's like there's not WMAS is not like a standard or a protocol or like Wi-Fi or anything. It's more just saying regulatory. It's a larger block, and as long as you follow these rules, which we'll talk about, you can do whatever you want. It can be bidirectional, but it doesn't have to be. It can be for microphones or comms or whatever you want. You just have to abide by the rules. And the idea when we pitched this to like the NAB and large broadcasting organizations, that they're the incumbents, and they were worried about users using this new construct and being wasteful with it, right? One microphone taking up an entire TV station and that sort of thing. So there's some provisions put into the rules that help prevent that type of thing. Because that's not really going in the right direction, like using more spectrum and being wasteful, and then taking away from other people or causing interference. So there are different approaches. Yeah, the Shure approach is like we have blocks of 400 kilohertz and 800 kilohertz, where we could put 2 stereo or 4 stereo respectively. And then the Sennheiser approach is that they're taking up a whole TV station at this time, like 6 megahertz or 8 meg, the whole block. So it's a little bit different ways of thinking about it. There are pros and cons of each, of course, but the larger the block you have, the larger the target you are for interference. How does the system handle that? Also, as we're going to these major cities in the slides we showed, are you going to find an entire TV station to yourself and that sort of stuff? So things to think about. I think WMAS is great. It's not the last we're going to see of it, but I don't think it's going to replace narrowband in the immediate future for some time now.
Yeah, and I think just because it is so new, and I think you all are here to learn about the newest stuff, I'm going to correct me for anything Shure that I
gotcha.
I misspeak, and I'll try not to misspeak about Sennheiser. So for example, on the Sennheiser system, it's very interesting. There's one pack that's got a mic input and earphones. So like, you know, when we think about these systems as Gotham, we say, oh my God, news, right? Like a newscaster, they have an earpiece, they have to speak, they're in a studio. There's often like up to 14 guests in a studio. The talent really loves that it's only one pack. But for us on location, it requires a base station. There is no portable, receiver yet. I can't speak for them. So like I thought immediately for our purposes, like a reality show where you have producers that need to listen to different feeds and, you know, lots of different contestants. And if they all stay on a stage or in a house or whatever the reality show is, that's great. But the moment they do a challenge off-site, there's no portable receiver that is useful for them. The Shure system, I tend to think of it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, as kind of unidirectional, right? It's high quality sends to packs. So I believe that in the designers' minds, they thought of IEMs, like a concert tour where you have 10 musicians on stage, each needing their own mix. Traditionally, that would have been 10 transmitters. And so now how do you combine that? How do you make that more spectrally efficient? For our world, I still think there's application. The packs are quite portable. The receive packs are fit on your body. But like there are a couple of jobs that I can think of where being able to send 10 different mixes through a single carrier, even if it is a bit bigger than 200 kilohertz, is still very, very useful. So again, sort of like WMAS, you're obviously hearing about it, you're reading about it. Not necessarily like a slam dunk for our market, but definitely has applications.
It's another tool in the toolbox. It's another option that you have. And like on the PSM system or the Accent Digital PSM, we have WMAS modes. We also have analog modes and we have digital modes. We kind of give you a turn the dial and pick whatever mode you want. So if it's not, we have this conversation about making things more efficient and putting more channels in a smaller space, but we also have the same conversation about putting more eggs in one basket. What happens when I do get interference? Do I lose the entire block? Does my entire shoot go down, or do I just lose that one channel? These are things to think about. If I have a band playing on stage with 4 IEM packs all in a WMAS block and I get interference, can I change just one of the users to another space, or do I have to interrupt all 4 users at the same time over a remote and so forth. So I like WMAS. I think this is just the beginning of it, and it may be the future of wireless to come. But as of right now, we're still in this this is the newest, shiniest thing in the toolbox or toy box. And narrowband has been established for a long time. So we have narrowband analog, narrowband digital, and now wideband digital, which is this WMAS product. So it's exciting to see what the future will bring. But just because it's the newest, coolest thing out doesn't necessarily mean it's the right tool for every job at this moment. But you should learn about it and know about it and know its pros and cons, and who knows, it could help you out. Not only putting more channels in a smaller amount of spectrum, but also putting more channels in the chassis. This transmitter, even the Spectera or the Shure, you can do 32 mixes or in the same box. It's if you want to, all powered by WMAS, one rack space, 16 channels of stereo IEM or 32 mono IFB. So in a cart situation, maybe, if you have that need for a channel count, but with the pros and cons. We're going to fly through this a little bit quick. It all started in Europe. Europe kind of ratified this first, and then North America followed suit, and we have similar rules. Essentially, the rules are pretty simple. You can do whatever you want in that band as long as it can do 3 or more channels per megahertz. That is the rules. Also in the United States, the rules state that you cannot take whatever WMAS size block you're using and straddle 2 TV stations. That WMAS block has to fit completely inside of a TV station. So that's something to be aware of. Other than that, again, it's up to the manufacturer to do that and make sure they abide by the rules. And there's various channel counts, various amount of audio quality, latency things that you can select in that band depending on the implementation. Again, this is just one implementation from 2 different manufacturers. There'll be more to come. The exciting part about this is a lot of it can be done with firmware updates in the future. So if you wanted to change the architecture of it, you absolutely can. But at the end of the day, this WMAS stuff is just essentially using more than 200 kilohertz as long as you can be efficient with it and doing new and exciting things. Scalability is important, as we talked about. I think today we are already in an environment where we got A-list touring people using WMAS, and at the same festival that people are using analog and narrowband and digital narrowband. So all these devices have to coexist together and coordinate that with Workbench or Soundbase or your favorite tool. So it's still going to be it's still a new thing to a lot of coordinators where they're not completely aware of what this WMAS is, and to plan for that and showing up, at an event or a festival and saying, hey, yeah, I need 6 megahertz for myself. And they're like, what do you mean? I wasn't planning for that, or I don't even know how to coordinate that. I can't give that to you. So we all learning together, but again, narrowband is here to stay for quite a while. I don't think just because this came out, relatively new, that we're going to see narrowband go away by any means. And
I think this is an important point to make too, is look for manufacturers that are innovating in narrowband transmission. I think, for example, Zaxcom's direct conversion technology is definitely worth talking to Glenn about. And I think the idea that you can pack more and more channels. Similarly, Shure has, I think, high density mode. Sure. Where you can pack more and more channels into a given spectrum. I think this is where there's still significant evidence of innovation in narrowband technology. I think, the digital processing is improving, the codecs are improving, the RF circuits are improving, all at dramatic pace.
Agreed. Just moving forward, I'm going to switch gears, talk about WMSA. We opened up with WMSA. And again, if you haven't joined, we encourage you to join. There's no cost, no downside, no subscription, and we're not asking for money or anything like that. It's simply showing that you are invested in protecting the spectrum and supporting. And with that, you get to be a part of this community of what Peter and myself and many others are advocating for, and follow up on what we're doing at the FCC and when we go visit DC and how we are looking at protecting these large events coming up and such. So it's really an exciting thing. I will say with WMSA is really kind of cool because, I've got a lot of friends and colleagues across the industry that work for other manufacturers, and that's okay. But we have some pretty heavy hitters here from the manufacturer standpoint of those that are invested in WMSA. WMSA was started, kind of like the quick elevator pitch, is that There were existing organizations that were, kind of protecting spectrum, or that was part of their mission, but it wasn't the full mission. And that's what WMSA is all about, wireless microphones. We're not really interested in other wireless devices at this time, like video, and we don't have a conflict of interest from broadcasters who may be benefiting from selling their spectrum and so forth. So this is really a coalition of manufacturers, end users, rental houses, all of the above, to do what we've been talking about and making things happen. And in the short time that WMSA has been together, I've been really grateful to be a part of it, Peter, as well. We were like right in the thick of things, and actually going down to DC and talking to these people face to face and getting their temperature on it, and visiting the White House and all these other three-letter organizations. And the vibe has been good. It's been really kind of eye-opening. Before, I don't even think they knew who we were, and now they're like realizing how important and integral all of these companies that wireless microphones are to these big events that are coming up.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I would add is, that the telecom companies have multiple lobbyists lobbying for their interests. And even, it's really odd. Like, I've been tasked with reaching out to Disney to get them to be WMSA members, but there's multiple organizations that Disney is a member of that are almost opposed to WMSA's goals, right? Because they're interested in wireless content distribution. And so, yeah, that's that beachfront property. And so it's really important to have a voice. I hope we've done our job convincing I expect to see 50 new membership applications pop up, because please, they are our
Tell them Ben and Peter sent you.
That's right.
I think it's kind of cool that Jetwave and Gotham were members before the merger.
Yeah.
Just saying.
That's right.
Just saying. That's pretty fun. So.
In terms of time,
yes.
We're at 55 minutes. I want to be mindful of everyone's time.
Absolutely.
Do we want to screen for Q&A real quick?
Yeah, let's do that. Let you have some closing thoughts.
I want to. I just want to show this off. I want to leave everybody with one real tool that they can have to be able to scan the spectrum that we've been talking, right? Spectrum's invisible to our eyes. Yeah. How much is this?
These are about $179. This is a Tiny SA Ultra, and this is a very useful tool. Don't let the low cost fool you. I mean, we have spectrum analyzers that go up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, but for under $200, this one can actually be a very useful tool that you can use in your coordination or site survey. If you're going to order one of these, I would encourage you to get it from RL Electronics instead of like Alibaba or any of those, because there are a lot of fakes on the market. But as you can see, we have a real-time scan going on here from 470 to 608, and you can see just how accurate and quick it is. In addition, you can pop the SD card out of here and take the file and save the scan and move it into Workbench, or you can plug it into Soundbase or your favorite coordination software and use this as a really nice tool. Now, I'll just say you probably have scanning tools already, like in your rack. You can use that and connect it to your Workbench or your software or whatever you're using, and that's cool. But if you need to go ahead of time and kind of scope things out to see what you're faced with, you can just pull this out of your pocket. It's completely battery powered, and you don't need to plug into AC or bring your cart or batteries or anything.
I was going to say, if you're in the Shure ecosystem, Wireless Workbench is an amazing tool for coordination and real-time monitoring of Shure and other manufacturers' products. And you can take this, the SD card out of this, and load it into Wireless Workbench and use that as your scan. I'll also give a plug to a program called Soundbase, which is a great tool. It is free for controlling a single manufacturer's wireless. And it will take the real-time feed from this device and show real-time spectrum. So, those are two incredibly low-cost tools. I think hardware, software, we're up to $150.
Yeah. There is an original Tiny SA and Tiny SA Ultra. I would encourage you to get the Ultra. It's got a little bit better screen and better specs on it. And I usually carry it around in my bag with a couple of BNC adapters. So if I want to use a real antenna, a big antenna, I can plug it right into there and do some scanning. But a nice tool to have for short money. And if you're just curious what's going on in your world, you can pull it out, do a scan, save it, connect it to these softwares, and do some coordination with it. So
frequency coordinators that have access to like thousands of times costlier spectrum analyzers use this like as one tool in their arsenal.
It's so good for the price, really. It is.
I think we should turn it over to questions.
Yeah, any questions? Appreciate you hanging out with us.
Max.
Could you tell us what the graph there is showing?
Max says, can you tell us what the graph is showing?
Sure. I mean, well, most spectrum analyzers, you set a start frequency and a stop frequency, and then these spikes that you're seeing here are most likely TV stations, the big ones. And since we're at the Gotham Expo, you might see some narrowband ones as well coming from the next room, or even on our hips here that we have. So you're seeing both TV stations and other wireless microphones. But really, as we talked about earlier, what we're mostly looking for is the white spaces. Where are there not activity happening? And that's where you would want to put your wireless microphones.
Oh, and I have one really important use for this. Bad SDI cables have been the source of phone calls and scourge on set. And this, by the nature of it being so real time, you can run the antenna along the camera department, along the video monitor, and you'll see, a bad ground will turn it into a broadband radiator, and it'll be pretty obvious.
Yeah, if you put a directional antenna on it, you can go like Easter egg hunting for where the interference is coming from. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Also messes with camera department stuff. That's where the terabytes go down all the time.
Yeah,
They're not aware of it.
Yeah.
I'm just repeating for camera purpose. Yeah, it messes with camera. Bad SDI cables mess with camera department and their control systems too. So just having the tool to troubleshoot, to see the unseeable.
A big challenge for the wireless industry like Verizon and AT&T, T-Mobile is leaky coax cables on poles and such, because they carry all of the frequencies in that coax, and if there's a bad termination or an improper termination, it becomes a transmit antenna, and that can disrupt your iPhone and your cell phone covers. So that they spend millions and millions of dollars on policing that to find leaky sources of interference coming off telephone poles.
And because we're closer physically to the SDI cables on set, it's the same issue for us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
How do you stop this auction coming in 2030? Turning it back to WMSA, how do we compete with all that money, all that lobby money?
Great question. I mean, once it was told to me that the audio industry as a whole is about 2% of what the potato chip industry is. So buying it is pretty much out of the question. That is for sure. But advocacy of showing how important we are to these productions is paramount. And that's really what WMSA is doing. It's showing that, you want to have an Olympics, you want to have a Super Bowl, you want to have this. We're already stretched thin as it is. And if you take away more spectrum, things are going to have to suffer. There'll be much more wired XLR cables around the set and shoots and such. So once you kind of pose awareness of that and make it known, I think that is the first step of stopping or at least preventing this auction. Additionally, I mean, if this petition goes through, they're going to have to find out a place to put the TV stations, and that's going to be a challenge as well.
So one thing is, what happened the first time around was the people that were looking to buy that spectrum or lease that spectrum said, look, we searched the FCC database, there's hardly anybody using it. So one thing, join WMSA, because WMSA is already drafting the letter to write to the FCC, right? And you can just copy paste and sign your name to it. The other is by being Part 74 licensed, you now become a user registered in the FCC database, so that they can't just say nobody else is using that spectrum, right? They turn those arguments against us. They say it's a shared resource, nobody else is sharing it. Well, that's not true. And then education, I think, that's a big deal. I remember going to the FCC and talking about the TV shows use wireless mics, and they had no idea. They just thought it happened by magic. Actors spoke and somehow it got to tape. And, so I think all of these things do make a difference.
Yeah, the honest truth is the vast majority of wireless microphone users are unlicensed, and that's okay. But if they're trying to see the number of wireless users, and licensing is one of the ways of doing that, the first auctions are wow, there's only a couple thousand in the whole U.S. And I'm that is not accurate at all, and it had really no idea. So education on the community and education on the policymakers is paramount. And I will say the attitude has been good, especially with this whole World Cup and
Right.
Olympic stuff. They want these events tends to go well. So they're more open than ever to sharing spectrum that we didn't have access to. And we didn't mention it, but one of the things that WMSA is really doing is looking at the next wireless bands, whatever those may be. So we are already in conversations about using things where we weren't able to be used before in different frequency ranges up in the 1 dot whatever gigahertz, which is pretty cool. So.
What's the process for getting Part 74 licenses?
Oh, yeah, there's,
It's about, what, $300 and
Yeah.
a couple hundred pages of paperwork?
and
something like that?
paperwork, yeah. First, you have to be known to the FCC, which is filing for, I think they call it a ULS, and then you fill out the application. Local 695 has a great guide. There's a guy, Bill Ruck, I think his name, that will guide you through it. One trick that I know of is all FCC licenses are downloadable, so you can just download one and basically copy a successful one in your application. But it just takes time, and which is why people hire other people to do it.
Yeah, you can pay companies a few $100 and they'll do it for you and take care of all the paperwork, which is daunting, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's specific words that you have to avoid and specific words you have to add, and so that's why look at other applications that have successfully passed, and that'll give you a sense of it.
Yeah.
Considered having a session.
I would consider hiring somebody that's done it. I don't want to be the canonical expert on it because there are some caveats and stuff. But yes, we're actively trying.
Best interest that those of us who are using wireless would.
Either Gotham or Local 52, the way Local 695 is done, for sure. Yeah, Max.
Are there days that the FCC does scans? Could we all say, this is the day, like May 1 was Workers' Day? Could we find out that day and everyone turn on their RF devices?
Oh, I mean, I think I know that they've been to the Super Bowl.
We've had.
Yeah, and they've, I've been on the kind of coordination team of like NATO and stuff like that, and they're aware of the need for spectrum. You know, they're up against powerful forces. The biggest thing that I think you can do in terms of the specific action, is it Saturn V or is that the name of a band?
What, the Landmark?
The Landmark 5?
Yeah,
It's-
the Landmark 5,
Anyways,
yeah.
when that'll go from, hey, we have an idea, which is where it is now, to the FCC seeking comments, that's when you reply, and that's where WMSA will have a template for you to reply with.
Just to be clear, FCC does not have the manpower or the will to police the spectrum. They're not running around with spectrum analyzers finding people that are disobeying the law. That's not those.
The one way to get the Enforcement Bureau to show up is to mess with public safety.
If you mess with public safety, like I was mentioning earlier, FDNY and such, or if you mess with the telecom companies like the Verizons and you're operating in there, they will find you and send you a nasty cease and desist lawyer.
That has happened to a member in Local 52, where they showed up to set.
All right.
Thank you very, very much.
Thanks so much for coming. Yeah, we'll be hanging out all day.